Eric Mother at Mother.com. Just taking a look at the chart for lumber liquidators, LL, we can see that it's had a series of nice lows and moving higher over the last couple of months. So we're talking about the lows here, also this low here, and recently this low. So where do those lows come from on the chart? If we take a look at the daily RSI, we can see where that line comes from, or where these three support lines come from, and I'll show that in a second. So number one, we have to figure out, in trying to understand this, where the stock made a low, and of course this is where it made a low. The corresponding RSI level is there, corresponds with this intraday lows there. So what we do is we just draw a line there, and keep in mind that now we know that the stock has moved above this level. We know that that was a critical time and a critical movement on the RSI. So what we do is what we always do, which is draw a line from this level here. And every time the market bounces on this line or shows uniform activity below the line back above it, we know that is a buy signal. For example, here we went below it and back above it. Not the ideal or best uniform activity, but I'll take that as uniform activity, because if you draw a line in between those two levels or two areas, you can see that they do balance out. In other words, generally speaking, this area is equal in space and time to that area. So that to me is uniform activity. So of course, once the stock moves back above that RSI line, the stock is a buy. Again, we come here, we touch the same line with uniform activity below the line back above it for this re-entry. That one's very clear. And recently we came and touched that level there for the lows there. So all those 3 points can be explained simply by taking a look at how the RSI responded when it came to this line. And where does this line come from? This line comes from the ideal entry in the RSI that corresponds with the ideal entry in terms of price. So the recent movement does make sense based on the recent bounce. Now that's the daily. I want to show you a different perspective, because now that the stock has moved higher over the last couple of weeks, now the question is what next? To answer that, one can look at a long-term weekly chart, and here we have a 6-year weekly chart. I'll show you a couple of lines that might explain what the stock is gonna be setting up to do in the coming weeks. So again, let's go take a look at the break. This was the break, and this corresponds with the break coming off the highs. The break there corresponds with coming off the highs here at about 120 late 2013. So we know that was a critical level for the stock. How do we know that? Well, because the stock's much lower since then. So what we do is what we did for the daily. We draw a simple line like that. And we know that if the stock shows uniform activity, rejection around current levels, then we might expect that now the next meaningful direction for the stock is lower. So we need to watch for this for resistance, because resistance here week to week might suggest that the next swing trade is lower. There is also another line. This line corresponds with this low here through these lows here, and I'll just draw it simply like that. Now this line is packed with information, because you take a look at the break. Once the stock broke down here, coming off the levels somewhere there, we haven't been back to those levels. We came here, we hit this level a couple times, rejected here, rejected here, rejected there again. All of those 3 rejections came with uniform activity. Ultimately, it gave us the high there, and now we are coming back to back test that same level. So you can see that week to week, given those 2 lines of resistance, this is telegraphing that more than likely around here the stock is gonna stall. Of course we shall see, and of course we know that given the 2 lines, the only way the stock can see much higher prices below the $20 range is by moving above those 2 lines. So until we see that, we can assume that those 2 lines, line number 1 And of course, line number 2, going back to the previous break, these two lines are gonna put some type of a ceiling in terms of the stock's ambition to move higher. As long as the market confirms resistance on those two lines, then obviously the next meaningful swing trade for this instrument is gonna have to be down. It's a good study to see what happens whenever a stock comes back to levels that have been a problem. Otherwise, we shall see. Eric Muathe with Muathe.com. As always, good lesson here. Peace and blessings. EACS.